At this point, the Democrats have not really had a cohesive message, have not pulled things together.
Yes, if they get it right. And I think a lot of what we've talked about, and Joe, I think I've agreed a lot with what you said about the hollowing out of the middle of the country.
Don't tell me that.
And so the Democrats, again, need a coherent plan for how we're going to reindustrialize our economy, how we're going to prepare our workforce for robotic-based manufacturing, how we're going to build a business for a modern economy. That is going to be determinative of whether Democrats succeed. But yeah, there's a huge opening. People are really upset. And I asked, Wall Street, for example, which voted for Trump, this is what you voted for. And he's doing what he said he would do. Yeah.
Larry Summers was talking today saying it's going to be 2 million jobs potentially lost because of the tariffs hurting the economy.
It was the art of the deal. It wasn't blanket tariffs across the entire globe. It was the art of the deal. That still may be coming. Let's not. It's still early.
But then how does that square with onshore?
Because if you go to 0-0
from taxes to pay for your tax cuts,
it invites labor arbitrage, right? And so if you go to 0-0, then there's every incentive.
You're still not going to be here.
No,
I know it's 0-0.
Exactly. And so, that's why you need a coherent plan. But also, tariffs really work when you have a plan for rebuilding our economy, investing in research and science, robotic factories, training a new workforce to be the shift managers in those factories, really rebuilding our middle of the country, and then you use a stage tariffs surgically to support that.
I don't, I want the private sector doing it. That's probably where we'd still disagree, I guess.
Well, the private sector should do it, but I think when we de-invest in research and science and universities, our greatest companies are built on inventions that came out of NASA. And
no,
DARPA.
I know. That's kind of a red herring at this point. We're not cutting off all, don't worry till it actually.
Well, I don't know. If
you think the NIH is totally unfunded now, or something?
Well, no, but I think you're cutting back a lot of important research. It's
having an impact at the both hospital and university level.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of opportunity here too in terms of universities. The president's going and saying, cut back your DEI. The president should be going and saying, hey, I'm going to cut off your funding unless you invest in training the next generation of workers, unless you invest in robotics, unless you invest in manufacturing onshore. Those are the kinds of things that matter.
Okay. Oh, it's
Jonathan,
thank you. We both thank you. Andrew thanks you. We all thank you.
It's good to see you guys.
All right, let's take a look at the news that has been moving the markets in just the last few minutes. China coming out with these headlines saying it's the next step in the trade war. It's going to be imposing retaliatory tariffs of 84% on U.S. goods. That starts on April 10th. As a result, the futures sold off. You can take a look if a tick by tick. The Dow futures are now down by about 660 points. S&P futures are off by 73. The NASDAQ down by close to 200 points. Again, on a percentage basis, you are now talking about drops of 1.8% for the Dow, 1% for the NASDAQ, and 1.5% for the S&P 500. It's playing out in Europe, European equities as well. Take a look at those prices. A little weaker than we were before this. We were down by about 3% for most of the major averages. At this point, the German DAX is down by 3.8%. So is our Italian stocks. In France, the CAC is off by 3.75%, and then the FTSE is down by about 3.4%. Let's check out energy prices as well. You're seeing a steep drop in energy prices once again this morning, a decline of 6% from WTI. It's actually trading at below $56 a barrel. Brent crude is below $60 a barrel at $59.19. Natural gas prices are the only ones that are higher. RBOB gas down by about 4%, and we will continue to see this play out. I don't know if we've looked at treasuries yet. I'd be interested to see the reaction there because we are looking at higher yields across the board as prices have come down. In fact, the 10-year's at 4.39. The 2-year is at 3.76. So we'll keep watching this. Andrew, we'll send it over to you.
Thanks, Becky. We've got an exclusive interview right now. Someone who's watching the markets just as closely as we all are, Vlad Tenev, who's Robinhood's CEO. This is your business. Curious, before we even get into just the tariff of it all, just what you make of what's happening in the markets.
Yeah, we're seeing, thanks for having me, by the way. We're obviously seeing big swings. Yesterday was one of the biggest swings intraday in the markets since the global financial crisis, if not the biggest. And obviously markets don't like uncertainty here. And I think we all probably forgot in our collective consciousness that this was part of the first Trump administration, the tariff policy, and now we're waiting for clarity on the tariffs.
We're now in it. Let's talk about that, because you put out a tweet over the weekend. You said one great thing about the tariffs. There's not a lot of great thing about tariffs, but maybe there are. You said one great thing about tariffs: they can be modified or removed as quickly as they were introduced.
Yeah.
So yes, all of this could ostensibly change with a tweet, but at this point in the ballgame, do you think that is in the offing?
Yeah, so it probably wouldn't surprise you to hear that, generally speaking, I'm a fan of free trade. I mean, obviously, Robinhood does it on a retail level, and free bilateral trade, I think, is important. Now, I think what's tricky here is that when that trade is not bilateral, if there's restrictions that other countries impose on us,
right,
and we're not doing something about that, then we can get into a tricky situation. So I think the equilibrium where we end up is hopefully going to be something close to bilateral free trade.
How much, if that's the case, and you think that there's a rainbow on the other side of this, how much pain do you think that you, on a either personal level or just you think the American public, your consumer is willing to take to get there?
I wouldn't necessarily make a prediction about how this is going to go. I think there's a certain aspect of this which is a negotiation, and I'm not as privy as the folks in the administration about how that is going to play out.
Right.
But I mean, there's definitely a belief that it might work among some folks in the administration. So. Yeah, it's hard to say, though, how long it will last. My guess is that it'll have to be resolved before too long.
Well, so I think you look at what is happening on the retaliatory side with China, and it's unclear how quickly this could get resolved. And then there's a question, if you're going to make all these bilateral deals individually with each country, this could take a very, very long time. My question to you is, in terms of, we wake up in the morning, oftentimes the market's down a couple percent, at what point do you think that this spills over into the quote unquote real economy? We're going to have the CEO of Delta on in just a little bit, Ed Bastian, and it sounds like potentially this is already spilling over into their version of the economy.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the longer the tariffs go on, the more companies will have to adjust, and I think part of the hope is that over the very, very long run, this leads to increased U.S. manufacturing domestically, more factories, more things being built here. And I think to some extent, we all want that. Short term, I think there's uncertainty here. So we're all watching.
How much are you watching Treasury auctions, for example? I mean, one of the things we've been watching is the 10-year, and there's now speculation. If you're China, do you want to be owning U.S. Treasuries? Are you going to be buying U.S. Treasuries? Are you going to be dumping U.S. Treasuries? I mean, sort of how this all starts to play out in terms of also internally within this sort of financial plumbing of our universe, which is, does this start to spread into other places, private credit, other places in our market?
Yeah. I mean, there's been a long-term trend around foreign ownership, foreign purchasing of U.S. Treasuries going down over time. Probably over the last 10 years, that's been the trend. Short term, I think, we've seen it be volatile, but you also have counterbalancing factors. For example, if we get crypto clarity and stablecoin legislation, that creates a new market to some extent for U.S. Treasuries, particularly overseas. So we're watching both sides of this, of course.
In terms of retail flows and in terms of your own customers on Robinhood, what is your sense? And by the way, you now run a prediction market as well on there to some degree. What is the perspective you think that the retail crowd is thinking about? These are mostly young people who have not necessarily lived through a crisis before.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think in the past when I've been on your show and we've been through these types of events, I've told you retail has been net buyers of assets. They're buying the dip. And part of the reason for that is because Robinhood didn't have as many ways to short the market for active traders. You know, we still don't have equities shorting on the platform. You can only go long equities by and large, aside from ETFs and other things. But now we have futures. We've just rolled out a feature on options, which makes it easier to get into to execute on multi-leg options trades through our side-by-side chain, which has been working really, really well. So now, I think a big part of the reason is we just haven't had all the options for our active traders to trade. So there's a mix. You know, there's certainly some people buying the dip, but there's also active traders that are trading the market systematically on a retail basis.
Let's put Bitcoin up on the screen for a second, because that's obviously fallen off of its highs. And I mean, we're still in the, I think we're still under 80,000. We're at 76,000. What do you make of what's happened to the price action on that, given that it's really sort of separated itself, and not necessarily in a great way, from where gold, what's happening with gold?
Yeah, I think that, you know, people have been talking for a long time about Bitcoin being an inflation hedge, and then you have it sort of going in lockstep with the markets by and large, right? And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, it's still one asset and limited supply. Yeah, but, you know, a couple months ago, to know that the U.S. would announce a strategic Bitcoin reserve and to see what happens with the price, I don't think we would have expected that. That said, you know, I've been through so many short-term fluctuations. Things can change very quickly, and we just have to be ready. I think, as a platform owner, we've been very focused on making sure that we're stable and robust for customers, and you know, thus far, knock on wood, we've been pretty happy with the stability of the platform.
Do you think there's a Fed put on this market? And do you think the Fed will step? I mean, the Fed has effectively said we're not going to step in.
Yeah.
But do you think they will if something goes wrong?
Well, you know, that's interesting. You mentioned the prediction markets. Yesterday, we rolled out a larger selection of economic indicators. So now you can trade the consumer price index, you can trade year-over-year inflation, you've got federal funds rate, and those markets have been moving a little bit. I don't know if the prediction markets are yet saying that there's going to be a pivot in policy, but you know, just like you've seen moves in the 10-year, you've seen moves in the prediction markets. I think that's the great thing about it. It's a source of information, an alternative or perhaps a complement to the polls and what you see in the media. So I think we'll be watching those.
I just wonder whether, if you think that the tariffs, I mean, I wonder whether President Trump does have a put or some kind of protection on this market, insofar as that if things actually really go haywire, the Fed is going to be there, in which case maybe then the market, you know, not stabilizes, but at least there's some kind of floor, and that gives him some protection in terms of the ability to negotiate, even if people are unhappy about the negotiations.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the Fed is independent, makes their own decisions, so hard to say how the calculus is going on in the administration. Certainly, you've seen more people speculating on some sort of Fed action.
Becky? I think she's
Thanks, Andrew. Hey, Vlad, just wondering what retail investors are really thinking about this huge pullback that's happened over the course of just 4 trading days. It's a lot of pain like we haven't seen going back to like 2008. There are a lot of new investors who haven't seen moves like this, haven't experienced moves like this. Do they panic? Do they add to their selling? Do they double down? I had seen some statistics from JP Morgan that, you know, this is the first time as of like a day and a half ago, retail investors weren't net buyers on this dip. They were starting to become sellers. And I just wonder how you've seen that play out at Robinhood.
Yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, in the past, our customers have largely been buyers for some of the reasons that I mentioned earlier. But we have lots of different types of customers. You know, there's folks that are seeing this as a buying opportunity that are depositing. There's also folks that are more sophisticated, and they're trading quite actively in and out using options and in particular futures. So, you know, we're really seeing multiple types of activity among retail.
Before we let you go, this one's for Joe. Joe, your ears are going to perk up because we're going to talk about Augusta for a second. I know your favorite place. We'll try to get you a membership. You've got a prediction market going? What's happening here?
Yeah, so probably appropriate for our setting here in South Carolina. We just wrapped up the NCAA men's and women's college tournament, and we had prediction markets on those. And we actually did close to 400 million contracts for NCAA, which is pretty amazing. Shows the high level of retail interest in these products. And we're going to be launching the Masters as well to follow up on that. So we're continuing to roll out a selection of prediction markets. We're very excited about this new innovative asset class. The economic ones I mentioned earlier, but of course for our sports traders and fans, we've got the Masters.
There you go, Joe. See, we got to get your Robinhood account now.
I'm surprised you don't have one yet.
I know, I haven't looked at the odds. I'm wondering who the favorite is. Do you know, Vlad? Is Rory the favorite?
Well, we'll have to see. I think it'll likely go live later today in the next few hours.
Hey, Vlad, that did get some state regulators upset, though. Massachusetts is subpoenaing you over the betting. They're concerned about what took place with letting users bet on some of those things. In New Jersey, you had to halt the trading of that activity because they said it violated the state's constitution.
Yeah, so as with any new innovative asset class, we haven't really seen this before in the market. I think some states have taken the position that there's similarities to regulated betting. Of course, we believe that there's significant differences.
What are the differences between?
We're operating under CFTC, federally regulated products, so similar to futures outrights. These are CFTC regulated. The differences are really that, and the fact that there's no house. The prices of these products are generated by buyers and sellers meeting in a market. And, the dynamics are significantly different. For example, with conventional sports betting, the betting stops before the game, but these markets actually continue, and a lot of the activity actually happens intra-game when there's significant movement. So I think there's differences, and obviously, states have different motivations. Regulating that type of activity is a significant revenue driver for a lot of states. So
you think you're going to go to court in these states to try to win?
Well, I would like to not. I think thus far we've generally been very, we've been working with them trying to figure out solutions, and but I think there's going to have to be clarity for these types of products.
Vlad, Rory is plus 650. Scotty Scheffler's plus 4. So Scotty's the favorite. Rory is second. In fact, top 5 for Scotty, you don't even double your money. You don't even get even odds on finishing in the top 5. So I figured it was either Rory or Scotty. So adjust your odds.
Those are Robinhood numbers, or those are Fanatics numbers, Vlad, Joe?
I don't want to say. I don't want to make anyone mad because these are from DraftKings.
But that's the thing. He doesn't have the house, so his odds may be better for you.
Right. I have to see.
That's what a lot of people have been saying.
Okay. All right. I have to choose. Let's talk, Vlad.
Call me.
Well, take a look. Stay tuned on that.
Okay, Vlad, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Oh, so you corporate types think you're rock stars?
That's as ridiculous as us being corporate types.
Let's begin. Rockstar move using Workday to handle all our AI agents.
Well, watch me handle my agent, Gary. Bubbly water, no bubbles.
So what'd you do this weekend?
The usual.
Shout out to Carmen for using Workday to manage our people and AI agents.
What are we doing?
Just clap.
Carmen!
And Sullivan, Power Lunch, weekdays 2 Eastern, CNBC.
I'm a supermodel. I used their Baked and Brighten, like foundation powder, but I used it over the spackle primer. It was sick. Their squeezy blush, and then their In the Buff lip. I'm a model.
Precise designs, subtle curves, curated upgrades, elevated design for thoughtful living. Thuma.
I find it challenging to come up with a gift that's really impactful, something that really makes a difference. Jolie has been a tremendous gift. It's something that is not only looks beautiful, but makes us feel amazing, and is something that we get to use every day.
Look, great blue heron. You know, when I go, I'd like to leave some money to the local bird conservancy.
Doesn't count. What you need is a will, something you can sign and make official. Start your will at trustandwill.com now and make it count.
2 chance.
Delta Airlines, we talked about last hour. Phil LeBeau joins us now with a special guest. Hey, Phil.
Hey, Joe. Ed Bastian, CEO of Delta, joining us on a day where you report your results for the first quarter. Revenue essentially flat year over year, but I think people are interested in the guidance more than anything else and what you saw in the first quarter. When you look at the first quarter and the drawdown and the slowdown in demand, how quickly did it change?
It changed pretty markedly somewhere around late February into the back end of the quarter. But I tell you, for what we faced during the first quarter, it was a heck of a lot of turbulence. It was not just the economic uncertainties that we talk a lot about with global trade. We had a really tough weather month in January, both in the Southeast and the West Coast. And we had impact from the high-profile aircraft incidents, as well as the global uncertainties that we're all talking about. So you put that all together, I think our team did a great job in the first quarter. We came in with profits in line with where we were a year ago. I know not the growth that we talked about, but still in line, about $400 million of profits, $1.3 billion of free cash in a tough quarter. And as you know, the first quarter is always our most difficult quarter with the turbulence we faced. Typically, this year it was certainly on an accentuated basis.
That said, Ed, we were talking here in Atlanta just 3 months ago. You were forecasting a record year for profits, and now it's a far different story. Is the uncertainty with the trade wars, is it on the corporate side or is it on the leisure bookings and the average person saying, I'm not really sure I want to take this trip that I thought I would take?
So it's a little bit on both. It's principally in the domestic marketplace, principally amongst our most price-sensitive consumers, and it's also on a off-peak period. So we find the days of week are weaker in terms of the Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturdays versus the more typical business patterns. We also see corporates that started the year out growing 10% have stalled. And so as a result of that, they're now flat versus year ago. And I think that's true of our entire revenue mix. We also, though, do have green shoots. We're watching them carefully, but we have a great portfolio of higher margin premium services, whether it's our premium products, our international business, our American Express co-brand loyalty was up double digits in the quarter. And those products are offsetting some of that weakness to kind of get to a flat level of both revenues and hopefully margins.
When you mentioned that it's primarily the leisure traveler domestically, you talk to a lot of CEOs, not just about their booking plans, but about the state of business. Can you summarize for us, because we don't hear from many CEOs. They're afraid of saying something publicly because it might infuriate the Trump administration. What are you hearing back from other CEOs about the state of the economy right now and the state of business worldwide?
Yeah, well, we're in uncharted, unprecedented uncertainty when you look at what's happened and the pivot so quickly to this self-inflicted situation. Now, personally, and at Delta, we understand, trade is a normal thing and you need to go through. In fact, the first Trump administration, we worked very closely with the administration because we were having big issues with the Middle Eastern carriers, and they were quite helpful. But we did it over time. A long set of conversations, and it was more strategic. Trying to do it all at the same time has created chaos in terms of being able to make plans. So whether you're a corporate manager trying to figure out whether you want to step forward on an investment, whether you're a bond trader or in the markets trying to allocate capital, or even as a consumer, I think everything has stalled. And so there's been a freeze until we get better clarity. And the hope is the administration moves quickly through the uncertainty. I think our economy is going to continue to lose steam.
Last month, you said you did not think that we were headed towards a recession. Do you still feel that way?
I don't know. I think we're acting as if we're going to a recession. I think everyone is going into a defensive posture. you saw us, our announcement. We're taking second half growth out of our plan for the back half of the year. We're planning to grow about 4%. Now it's going to be flat. And so I think everyone's being prepared for uncertainty. And as a result of that, if that continues and we don't get resolution soon, we'll probably end up in a recession.
And quickly, summer bookings, how are they looking right now?
Summer bookings are in line with where we were a year ago. International is the one we always get questions about. International for us, about 80% of that's U.S. point of sale. And U.S. consumers are looking to go somewhere, particularly to try to get a reprieve from all the craziness we're going through.
Ed Bastian, CEO of Delta, on a day where they reported their Q1 results, more importantly, brought down the fact that they're not going to have guidance for 25 given the uncertainty in the market. Guys, we'll send it back to you.
Phil, thank you for bringing us that important interview. We appreciate it very, very much. When we come back, former Secretary of State Antony Blinken, in his first interview since leaving office, we're going to get into tariffs, Doge, Iran, President Xi, playing out these negotiations and what it could all look like. Squawk Box returns live this morning from Kiowa right after this short break.
Time now for today's Aflac trivia question. What term describes the illegal manufacturing, sale, or transportation of liquor? The answer when Squawk Box returns.
I'm the richest guy in the world. I have time to give.
I have people I can count on.
And a million stories to share.
The key to being rich is knowing what counts.
The next series of the world's first downside-protected Bitcoin ETFs with 100, 90, and 80% protection levels through our proven protection strategy. Count on us today for tomorrow.
Welcome to Club Champion with AI-assisted fittings to give you longer drives, fewer strokes, and a little more swagger. Full bag fittings are just $100 with code PERFECTFIT at clubchampion.com.
Goldilocks needs a place of her own, and fast. Thankfully, she's on Redfin. They update their listings every 2 minutes. And with so many options, she's bound to find exactly what she wants.
This one's just right.
Is she leaving?
Yes.
Oh, it's happening. It is happening.
Oh, this looks bad, Harris. We're probably going to have to amputate.
I'll get some 3D images to see how bad it really is.
I don't care how many Ds you use. His career's over.
Relax, Coach. There's no tear. He'll be fine.
Amazing.
Innovation changes everything.
What about Bobby?
Nah.
With one investment, you can access the NASDAQ 100 innovators who are rethinking the world. Before investing, carefully read and consider fund investment objectives, risks, charges, expenses, and more in prospectus at Invesco.com.
When breaking news of market volatility affects your portfolio, we are there for you so you don't panic.
Confidence takes time. The club creates confident investors no matter what the climate.
Go to cnbc.com/join Jim.
As we age, we get lines, and that's okay. But our makeup needs change. That's why I created What the Foundation. It's ultra moisturizing and melts seamlessly into your skin. Learn more at jonesroadbeauty.com.
The actual journey of helping your hair, it is a lot easier than you'd think.
Hims definitely worked.
I didn't expect so much hair to come back.
I went to the Hims website. Within 10 minutes, I was talking to a provider.
I started to see results in the first 2 to 3 months. Even when I'm running and my hair is sweaty, I do not have to worry about what it looks like.
And I don't have a white shiny spot anymore. Start today at hims.com.
At our previous home, we had had wood, and I never liked it. I wanted a sustainable option, and that made TimberTech the obvious choice for me. I love the indoor-outdoor living. I mean, to be honest, the decks made it even better. I'm so happy with it.
And now the answer to today's Aflac trivia question. Which term describes the illegal manufacturing, sale, or transportation of liquor? The answer? Bootlegging. The term was first used in the 1800s to denote the practice of concealing flasks of illicit liquor in boot tops.
Welcome back to Squawk Box this morning. We are in Kiowa, and I sat down with former Secretary of State Antony Blinken for his first interview since leaving office. As we're all trying to make sense of these tariffs and what it all means, I asked him what he thought of President Trump's tariff policy as he watched it all play out from the Rose Garden.
This was global tariffs, including against the very countries that we need to be with us to deal with a problem like the problem posed by China. So that's what first struck me. This seemed to be America against the world, not America taking on discrete problems that do require.
Have you gotten phone calls from your former counterparts, if you will, abroad after this to say, you know, what am I supposed to do? How should I deal with this?
I've gotten a lot of phone calls. All I can tell you, though, is I'm not in the business of giving foreign leaders advice. But folks who called me, former colleagues, I certainly listened to what they were saying. And Andrew, here's the problem. Look, it may.
What are they saying?
So, first of all, if they're allies, or maybe in some cases former allies, they're aghast at the United States going at them. And what I'm hearing is that here's I think the real challenge. It's possible that in some of these instances there'll be a negotiation and maybe something concrete and positive will develop. But the message that this is sent to countries around the world, including some of our closest allies and partners, is we need to move away from the United States. We can't rely on the United States. We've got to work around the United States. So we're going to be doing more with each other and, in some cases, more with China. You now have the EU trade reps meeting with their Chinese counterparts. The South Koreans and Japanese, for the first time in 5 years, meeting with their Chinese counterparts. So my concern is that this is pushing countries that we need with us to deal with a lot of challenges away from us and maybe even toward China.
How do you see the negotiations with China itself playing out? The president has now talked about effectively tariffs that could get ratcheted up to 104% effectively of the price tag of things that are being imported into our country.
Well, this is an extraordinary game of chicken because I think it's very hard for Xi Jinping to back down or be seen as backing down. So they're going to have to find some way out of this spiral.
They are or we are?
In effect, I think both of us, because I think this heads to a very bad place. Last time around, President struck a deal with China. China vowed to buy a lot of stuff from us. They never actually did, in part because of COVID, maybe in part because they weren't going to follow through, but there was an off-ramp. There needs to be some other kind of off-ramp here that allows Xi Jinping to do what he needs to do to cover himself politically, but also get some kind of result that the president can point to. But again, I come back to this proposition. Look, when we're dealing with China alone, and there are many unfair trade practices that everyone's very familiar with, the overcapacity problem is real, especially on cutting-edge technologies. But when we're dealing with China alone, we're what, 20% of world GDP? When we're aligned, as we were just a few months ago, with partners in Europe, partners in East Asia, we're 50 or 60% of world GDP. A lot harder for China to ignore. That's the way to get results. So I'm afraid that, you know, we're heading to a place where instead of it being America first, it's America alone.
Your last speech in your role as Secretary of State, you talked about Germany and Japan being our closest allies. Yeah. We are now apparently in some form of negotiation or conversation with Japan over these tariffs. Mm-hmm. What do you think the relationship ultimately looks like after this? And do you think that the toothpaste is out of the tube, that the relationship has fundamentally changed at all for countries where we were allies or are allies, whether it's Germany or Japan or the UK, given what's happened here even just the past week?
Look, one of the most extraordinary developments over the last 80 years, which in the sweep of human history is not a lot, is the fact that over the last 4 years when I was on the job, probably our two closest partners were Germany and Japan. That's an incredible story. The idea that we would put that in doubt.
Do you think it's genuinely in doubt, or do you think that this is something that can be walked back from?
Look, something has been, I think, irretrievably lost. Now, fundamentally, they still have strong interests, and we, of course, have a strong interest in both partnerships. But this question of trust, which is the foundation of the partnership, that has now been called into question. And so even if they think, well, maybe we'll get someone down the road who does business in something in a way that we're more used to, they really can't count on the fact that that's going to be enduring.
Right.
And putting that genie back in the bottle is going to be hard.
The art of the deal when it comes to tariffs. There's a real question mark of how long this could take. Yeah. Do you get a Bretton Woods style kind of deal where everybody gets involved? Are they all bilateral one-offs? Does this go on for months and months and months, in which case you have a paralysis in terms of investment? You have some leaders, I think, looking at our country saying, well, maybe I should wait, see what the courts say. Maybe the markets go down, and that puts pressure on, Republican members of the House and the Senate to put pressure on the president. How do you see these dynamics?
First, it would be good to know what the actual objective is, because I've heard a multiplicity of rationales for why we're doing this. Is it to raise revenue? Is it to bring manufacturing back to the United States? Is it to deal with trade imbalances? What is it? And we keep hearing different stories. So I think it would be very helpful for the administration to come forward and make clear what they're actually trying to do. Now, if this is about what the president has talked about for a long time, which is the sense that other countries, to quote him, are ripping us off, and the way he sees that is through trade imbalances, well, it's not at all clear to me that tariffs and trade imbalances are that closely connected.
Is there any way in your mind this could end well?
At this point, I think maybe there are some deals where there are egregious imbalances. Maybe they get corrected. But I am more than deeply concerned that the message that we've sent to the world is you can't count on, you can't trust America. And the net result of that is they'll be looking for ways to work around us, away from us, and that's not going to be good for us.
I want to pivot to Iran for just a moment. President Trump saying that the U.S. will have direct talks with Iran on Saturday, apparently to discuss a nuclear deal. Iran officials are saying that this is not going to be a direct conversation, it will be an indirect conversation. What do you think is really happening?
Well, first, if there are talks, whether they're direct or indirect, I applaud that, because it's good if we're talking, and it's good if we're trying to do something about the nuclear program. My sense is that President Trump would like a deal. He'd prefer to get a deal than to have to use military means. One, he doesn't want another war. Two, military means in dealing with their nuclear program less effective than actually having a durable agreement. And we had that agreement. We had the agreement that President Obama reached. We had their nuclear program in a box. Unfortunately, President Trump tore it up. At the time, he said that he was going to produce a better deal. He didn't. Now there's an opportunity.
And guys, I think we do have to watch these conversations with Iran over the weekend expected, because I've been talking to a lot of people here and elsewhere that's another concern that we have not been spending a lot of time talking about, but perhaps we should be. There's a lot more of the conversation with former Secretary of State Antony Blinken on CNBC.com this morning, including his perspective on other global hotspots, including Russia, the Ukraine war. And we also talked about Elon Musk and Doge's impact on USAID, and we get into all of it, and you can check that out online now. In just a little bit, I'm going to be speaking right here live with Apollo Global Management CEO Mark Rowan. It's another exclusive interview live in Kiowa in the next hour. Of course, one of the most influential people in the world of finance, and he's got his finger on the pulse of all of this, so we're going to speak with him. And of course, he was also somebody at one point that was up for being the Treasury Secretary before Scott Bessent was given that job. So he's got a lot of insight on all of this. Becky?
Andrew, thank you very much. Back on Capitol Hill, support is building to give more control over tariffs back to Congress. And joining us right now to talk about it is Congressman Josh Gottheimer. He is a Democrat from New Jersey. Also, Congressman Don Bacon, who's a Republican from Nebraska. Yesterday, they introduced bipartisan legislation in the House. It's called the Trade Review Act. It's the companion bill to legislation that was introduced by Senators Maria Cantwell and Chuck Grassley last week. Gentlemen, welcome to both of you. We're watching this very closely. Thank you for coming. I think, Congressman Bacon, you are particularly in the hot seat on this as a Republican who is defying the president over what he wants to get done. Why are you doing this? Why are you signing on?
First and foremost, the Constitution gives Congress the power of tariffs and taxing in Article 1, and I think we should reclaim that. I don't think the founders wanted a single person to make a decision and change all of our tariff policy and wage a tariff war against 60 nations without congressional approval. So I think first of all, it's constitutional, and two, I have concerns. I think it's a very high-risk move by the president when you have a trade war with 60 countries. We don't have a good experience with this. I mean, the last time we've done something like this was 1930. That did not turn out well. I'm not anti-tariff across the board. I think China and others deserve to have tariffs the way they treat us with our trade and our exports. But I don't really think a trade war with the world is a smart way forward.
Here are some comments from President Trump last night. This is what he's saying about it. He says, I see some rebel Republican, some guy who wants to grandstand, say, I think that Congress should take over negotiations. Let me tell you, you don't negotiate like I negotiate. Oh, that's what I need. I need some guy telling me how to negotiate. What is the pressure you have received from the administration to this point? And what is the likelihood that some of your Republican lawmakers will go along and sign off with you on this?
Well, we have some already. And like you say, it's a companion bill to Senator Grassley. It's an identical bill. So this is I'm not just the only guy out here. There's a handful of, I think, very prominent Republicans in the Senate that agree to this. And I'm not trying to tell the president how to negotiate, but he has to come to Congress and request approval when he wants to do tariffs. And I think a lot of Congress will support tariffs on China. They would support tariffs on Russia, which was not on the tariff list this time, which they should have been. But we're not anti-tariffs in all situations. But we should have a vote. James Madison wrote this, that Congress should be the approval authority for taxes and tariffs. I mean, we have the power of the purse, and we gave the president emergency powers. But this is not emergency powers. This is resetting tariff policy, and that's really in the realm of Congress. So I stand with a handful of Republicans in the House. We'll get more on probably today or tomorrow. We have 7 Republicans in the Senate. And Senator Grassley is a very good conservative, respected by Republicans and Democrats alike. And I think I'm on solid ground here.
Congressman Gottheimer, what are you hearing from your colleagues, and what do you hope to accomplish with this?
Obviously, Don Bacon may be in the frying pan a little bit more than me, but I'll tell you this. The American people are really in the frying pan because I've been home in diners everywhere talking to folks, and they're panicked, right? You're talking about this global trade war. It's one thing to go after China, our number one adversary. It's a whole thing to go across the board to 60 countries and literally go after the American people's, their savings, and they're watching their retirement savings crumble, and they're seeing prices go up already. Right, so you're seeing people panic about both things. They're already getting crushed, and our job should be to get costs down, get taxes down. They thought that's what they were getting with this administration. If anything, this global trade war is sending prices way up and sending the retirement savings way down. So what I'm hearing from not just Democrats, but from Republicans too, is you can't just come in here and do what you want. You got to come to the Congress, and that's what our bill does. Come to the Congress and ask for, as the Constitution affords, ask for approval for each one of these tariffs, because this is just chaos, and it's causing huge impacts on our economy.
Congressman Bacon, we've been watching every development in the markets, and it is amazing to see. It's possible that the negotiations with, the 100 trading partners, every time that looks like it's going to go forward, the market seems to recover. But then once again, we're faced with China. And today, China's going to 84%. We've been retaliating. So it sounds like both of you say you're okay with tariffs against China, but not with everyone else. We may settle with everyone else. They may make deals. China's still going to be the elephant in the room, and it's going to be very disruptive. And what we're seeing in the markets might not be fixed, Congressman Bacon. So I'm not sure that, that China's not the looming threat that's causing all this angst.
We could have done this one-on-one with China, not necessarily go after all of EU.
Israel
has zero tariffs.
We may end up there with deals with everybody else, but I don't see it happening with China. So I don't know.
I hope it turns out all right, but it's a high risk. It's a high-risk operation, what we're doing right now.
And Joe, you're already seeing some of our key allies, who've also imposed these tariffs on, say that they're going to be talking to China, and that would be a huge loss for us, right? I mean, so you don't want this global trade war against our adversaries. And yes, the market, right, is S&P down nearly 20%. So it's hugely disruptive, not just to the market, but to our whole global relationships and our economy. And to do this all at once without a strategy, with more chaos, causing tax increases, tariff tax increases on our families, and hitting our seniors like this who are trying to retire. I mean, this is not a strategy. And what we're, I think, asking for is a smart, strategic approach, not just an across-the-board hit, and come to the Congress and actually make your case, as we're supposed to in the Constitution, to prove these things.
In regards to China, if I may add, I'm from Nebraska. We export beef, pork, corn, and soybeans. I got to tell you, China is a terrible partner to work with. we'll have beef halfway to their ports, then they'll change their mind, or the beef gets to the ports, they won't unload them, and they've been very hard to work with, and I think we should play hardball with them. They buy our businesses, steal the technology, and so there needs to be a reckoning with China. But I share Josh's view. Taking on 60 countries at once, it creates chaos. The last time the Republican Party has stood for tariffs like we are right now was 1930. That did not turn out well, and that was our policy prior to the 30s. But we learned that free trade ultimately is the best way to go. It's got to be fair, but free trade is the ultimate goal because you get better products at a better price, and you get it to the customer more effectively. Right. Free trade works.
And they didn't hire Donald Trump. I don't think people who voted for Donald Trump asked for higher taxes in a recession, right? And that's where he's sending us if we keep going down this path.
Congressman Bacon, my question to you is, your Republican colleagues, both in the House and in the Senate, what would it take for them, really? What would it take in the stock market? What would it take in the public to actually truly step up and tell the president, you're not doing this, we're doing this, and to effectively take it away from him?
Well, initially, people want to give the president a chance on his agenda. By the way, I think most people voted for President Trump because of the border. They didn't like inflation. Crime was an issue. I think Afghanistan was there. Like Josh was saying, I don't think they were envisioning a trade war, even though the president did talk about tariffs, but I don't think that's what motivated the election results. Right now, you got 7 Republicans in the Senate that are on board. I have 3 right now on the House side, but I have about 10 others that want to talk to the trade representative before they make a decision. But we could end up with 10 to 15 in a week or so. Who knows?
What do you need
I don't think this is going to move.
How many do you need to override his veto that he has already said that he will bring on the?
Well, you have to have 66% total. But I don't think this is prime time yet. We have it here. It's going to become prime time in a month or 2 months if the current economic environment's going the same direction. I think there'll be more pressure to challenge this if we don't see an improvement, whether it's in the market or if we see an increase in inflation. So this is a prime time yet, but it could be in a month or two. And I think we're in the right position constitutionally, and we will likely grow support in a month or two if things don't turn around.
Okay. Congressman Gottheimer, Congressman Bacon, thank you for joining us this morning. Appreciate it very, very much. Meantime, we're going to get straight over to senior economics reporter Steve Leisman. He's got some breaking news this morning on the future of that American sovereign wealth fund that we've heard so much about earlier this year. Steve, what's going on?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. The Treasury is moving ahead with all this tumult going on elsewhere. It's moving ahead with President Trump's aggressive plans to create a U.S. sovereign wealth fund. CNBC has learned that top Treasury officials met yesterday in Washington with former Fed, former Treasury officials, and economists from top Wall Street investment banks to get feedback and to discuss how it could be structured, how it could be funded, and what it would buy. Presiding over the meeting was J.R. Gibbons, a former fighter pilot who worked at an investment bank, founded a tech startup, and also led an effort at the Department of Defense to attract private capital to support national security. A Treasury spokesperson confirmed the meeting but declined to provide any details to CNBC. People at the meeting, though, said the discussions were a mix of talking about ideas and participants expressing some skepticism about the whole idea of a sovereign wealth fund. Among the discussions were 2 potential funds, one that builds wealth for future generations, for example, monetizing land owned by the federal government. Another might invest in economic security, things like rare earth metals. The included funding, whether the government should issue perhaps debt approved by Congress and capture the difference between the interest rate on the debt and equity returns. Also discussed was governance, including the idea of an independent board, but concern that such funds was expressed that they can be rife with cronyism and corruption. Also asset purchases. What should the fund buy, including even should it buy foreign assets? Now, some on Wall Street have jokingly asked, where's the source of wealth for the sovereign wealth fund? Most countries that have these kind of funds have a flow of funds, like from oil or other things, to invest. Treasury appears to be far from any decisions, but Secretary Scott Bessent has said publicly the fund could be up and running in a year. The president's executive order from early February tasked the Treasury and Commerce with a report, guys, as soon as early May.
Okay, Steve Leisman, it's a fascinating one. What do you think the prospect, given everything else is going on in the world between tariffs, the budget that has to get somehow resolved this year and everything else, that this is really on the front burner? I know they're having these meetings, but If we're talking in a year from now, do you think there is a fund?
I think there's a long way to go, Andrew. But let me just talk real quickly about what's happening in the 10-year. There is some concern out there and some discussion about what is moving it. The first thing I think to talk about here is the idea that both the 10-year and the dollar are moving counter to what you would expect. Both the 10-year and the dollar are moving counter to what you would expect.